No criminal charges against Lucy Letby, but is that really the whole story? In this video, we break down why the CPS decision, coming amid new expert opinions and ongoing challenges to her original convictions, could have far-reaching consequences. We'll explain why the CCRC may take time. This isn't just about one decision, it's about the whole system. Stay until the end because there's more here than meets the eye.
Welcome to Spoken Injustice, where we put the criminal justice system in the dock. This is an extended version of our January news session that went out last week. We just missed the Lucy Letby development by a few hours last Tuesday, so let's talk about it now. Let's take this step by step. Back in July 2025, Cheshire Police announced that they had sent a new file to the Crown Prosecution Service. This wasn't about the convictions we already know about. It was about additional potential charges linked to the deaths and collapses of babies at both the Countess of Chester Hospital and Liverpool Women's Hospital. Fast forward to 20th of January 2026, and the CPS came back with more detail. They confirmed they had looked at 11 possible charges involving 9 infants. To break that down, most of them related to the Countess of Chester Hospital, 2 related to Liverpool Women's Hospital, and the CPS considered both murder and attempted murder in these cases. The headline from the CPS press release stated no criminal charges against Lucy Letby. The CPS said after a thorough review, the evidential test just wasn't met. In plain terms, they didn't think there was a realistic prospect of conviction in any of those additional allegations, even with the evidence provided. So far, this is fairly standard. Police investigate, CPS decides whether to charge. Sometimes the answer is no. What wasn't standard was what happened next. On the same day, Cheshire Police released a statement saying they were disappointed. They said that this wasn't the outcome they had expected, that they believed the evidence met the charging standard, and that the CPS did not agree despite our representations. They added, we must respect the decision that has been made. Let me tell you, that raised a few eyebrows. Public disagreement like this between the police and the CPS is unusual. These conversations usually happen behind closed doors, not in press statements. So, what does despite representations referred to in the police statement actually mean? Well, this is where it gets a bit technical, but stick with us because it matters. There is a formal process for the police to challenge a CPS charging decision. It sits under what's known as the Director's Guidance on Charging, currently the 6th edition. Under that guidance, if the police disagree with a CPS decision, an officer of a list inspector rank can appeal it. That appeal has to be recent, recorded, and focus on why the evidential test is said to be met. The CPS then conducts an independent review, and if needed, the issue can be escalated further to senior prosecutors. So disagreement isn't unusual. Let me tell you, I was a prosecutor myself. but it's normally handled through that structured process, not through public statements. This brings us to the bigger question: was it right for the police to publicly express disappointment? Procedurally, there are clear mechanisms for resolving disputes between the police and the CPS, and they are designed to keep those disagreements professional, internal, and evidence-focused. Going public risks blurring roles. The CPS is independent for a reason. Charging decisions are meant to be insulated from pressure, emotion, or public expectation, especially in cases as sensitive and high profile as this one. Expressing disappointment publicly can create the impression the CPS has somehow failed victims. So while the process for challenging the decision appears to have been followed, in that the police states that they have made due representations, the communication of that disagreement was unusual and arguably unnecessary. In cases like this, the system already has safeguards. The real question is not whether disagreement exists, it's whether airing it in public helps anyone at all. In our view, this outcry looks less like surprise and more like damage control. The original investigation and prosecution, as we know, have come under sustained and serious criticism from both legal and medical professionals. And the tone of that statement reflects that pressure. By stressing that the CPS decision has no bearing on the existing convictions or on Operation Duet, the police appear keen to draw a protective line around everything they have done thus far. We also know, and here comes the safeguards, that the CPS decision can be challenged by the complainants under the Victims' Right to Review (VRR) scheme, which provides a victim or their families with the right to review CPS decisions, not to start a prosecution or to stop a prosecution. This is a right to request a review of a final decision, but it is not a guarantee that proceedings will be instituted or reinstituted. Following a review under the scheme, qualifying decisions not to charge, to discontinue, or to withdraw can be instituted or reinstituted subject to any statutory time limits. As far as we understand, this right has not been exercised, or at least has not been made public. Before we move on to what we think this CPS announcement really means for Lucy Letby in the bigger picture, it's worth pausing to look at how the VRR scheme process actually works, especially since helping people understand how the system works is one of Spoken in Justice's aims. So what decides how a review is handled? It comes down to two things: what decision is being challenged and who made that decision in the first place. These factors determine the route the review will take. In most cases, it starts with a local review. That means a different CPS prosecutor of the same rank, someone not involved in the original decision, takes a fresh look at the case. And if the person requesting the review isn't satisfied, well, if the case qualifies, it can be escalated to an independent review. This is carried out by a more senior prosecutor who has had no prior involvement at all. Let's now look at timeframes. When does the clock start? Once the CPS issues the decision letter, the victim has 10 working days to ask for a review. What happens after the request goes in? The CPS aims to complete the local review within 10 working days of receiving it. And what if an independent review is available? If the victim wants to take it further, they must request that within 10 working days of the local review outcome. The independent review itself is usually completed within 20 working days. So what's their overall target? Ideally, the CPS aims to complete the entire process, including communicating the final decision, within 30 working days, even in cases involving senior prosecutors. And if it takes longer, that is a possibility, and it can happen in complex or sensitive cases. When it does, the CPS is expected to inform the victim and provide progress update, usually no more frequently than every 20 working days, until a final decision is reached. It should become clear within the next 10 working days whether that route is going to be pursued. But turning back now to the CPS decision. Although, as correctly stated by the police, it does not undermine the existing convictions, we believe it has broader implications that are easy to miss at first glance. In particular, this CPS decision could act as a useful catalyst for the Criminal Cases Review Commission to move forward on the Lucy Letby application submitted by her barrister Mark MacDonald in April 2025, an application that has now been under consideration for some time. The significance of the CPS decision lies in the fact that it was reached amid ongoing challenges to the original prosecution and investigation and the development of new expert positions. Viewed in that context, the decision shows that independent prosecutors reassessing related evidence with the benefit of what is now known did not consider the evidential threshold to be met. Crucially, the decision also undercuts any assumption that further scrutiny of the case can only strengthen the prosecution's position. Instead, it shows that when additional evidence and allegations are tested independently, the outcome is not necessarily supportive of the original narrative. That shift matters for the CCRC, which must consider whether new arguments, new expert opinions, or fresh analysis could realistically lead to the Court of Appeal to reach a different view. In that sense, the CPS announcement may give the CCRC a clearer basis to act. We know they are independent, but there is some scope for influence, in our opinion. It reinforces the legitimacy of the concerns raised in the application and highlights that serious doubts about evidential sufficiency are not confined to campaigners or commentators, but are shared by one of the central institutions within the criminal justice system itself. That may not undermine the outcome, of course, but it could well help break the inertia and prompt a substantive decision. However, if our view is correct, that the CCRC has a certain influence from other institutions, and that the CPS decision not to pursue charges in these latest allegations could act as a prompt for the CCRC to move more quickly on the application currently under review, there are still factors that may slow the process. Two outstanding reviews in particular are likely to influence how the CCRC proceeds. First, it was recently announced that the Cheshire Coroner's Court will open inquests into the death of 5 babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital and 1 at the Liverpool Women's Hospital, starting on the 4th of February. These inquests are directly connected to the broader context of the case, and the CCRC will undoubtedly want to consider any findings or evidence emerging from them before making a decision. Second, the final report from the Thirlwall Inquiry is expected imminently. Given the scope and the significance of that report, it is likely to have a substantial impact on how the CCRC assesses the case. Between the inquests and the inquiry final report, there is a strong possibility that the CCRC will take additional time to carefully consider all of this new information before reaching a conclusion. In other words, while the CPS announcement may provide an incentive for the CCRC to act, it seems probable that the CCRC will wait for these 2 key developments to be resolved first, meaning a final decision may not come immediately. So, after everything we have covered, the CPS decision on the latest charges, the structured review process, the timing of the CCRC, the upcoming inquests, and the imminent Thirlwall Inquiry final report, it's clear that this case is far from simple. Yet this raises a serious and very human question. At the heart of it, we are talking about someone whose convictions are now widely regarded as being unsafe. While the legal bureaucratic processes take their time, inquests, inquiries, and careful reviews by the CCRC, the individual remains in prison, enduring the consequences of a conviction, or many convictions, that many argue may not withstand scrutiny. It's a tension that exists in many legal systems. The need to be thorough versus the need to be fair. The system is rightly cautious. It wants to avoid mistakes. But at the same time, justice delayed in cases like this risks becoming justice denied. How long should someone continue to serve a sentence while procedural checks play out, even when there is growing reason to question the safety of their convictions? Ultimately, there are no easy answers. What we can say is that transparency, accountability, and urgency matter. The CPS decision, the reviews by the CCRC, and the findings from the inquest and inquiry should all be considered carefully, but they should also be acted on without unnecessary delay. The public, and most importantly the individuals affected, have a right to expect a system that is both careful and fair, one that can correct its errors in a timely manner. So the question lingers. Is it right that someone whose convictions are increasingly seen as unsafe continues to languish in jail simply because bureaucracy is taking its time? That's the challenge the legal system must confront, and it's a question we, as a society, cannot ignore. I hope we have been able to contribute something meaningful to the ongoing debate around this complex and deeply troubling case. However, we must add that a lot of the complexity we see today is in many ways self-inflicted. Had the original trial been fully open and fair, focused on uncovering the truth rather than fitting a narrow narrative, we might not be in a position where multiple separate inquiries and inquests have become necessary. At the same time, there is a flip side to this. The fact that this case is now being examined from multiple angles by the courts, by the CCRC, and through independent inquiries and inquests may be frustrating in terms of timing, but it could also be beneficial in terms of accuracy and thoroughness. Each process operates independently and brings its own expertise to bear, increasing the chance of arriving at a more complete and reliable picture of what actually happened. So while the system may feel slow and the layers of scrutiny overwhelming, there is at least a possibility that together these multiple reviews and inquiries could bring us closer to the truth that any single trial ever could. That is, of course, provided that each process truly operates independently. That said, there are clear limitations. For instance, neither the Thirlwall Inquiry nor the upcoming inquests are permitted to challenge the convictions that still stand in the Crown Court today. That constraint naturally limits how far they can go in reassessing the case. But there is also room for innovation. No longer possible with the Thirlwall Inquiry, but it will be up to the coroner in the upcoming inquest to exercise some creativity in navigating these limitations, potentially finding ways to explore aspects of the case that the current legal framework might otherwise restrict. And perhaps in the longer term, this raises serious questions about whether the law itself needs reform to allow independent inquiries and inquests to fully examine cases where serious questions about convictions remain after a trial. In other words, while the process is painstaking and sometimes frustratingly slow, these multiple layers, if applied thoroughly, could still help achieve a better, more nuanced understanding of what really happened. It's a reminder that procedural complexity can be frustrating, but it can also be an opportunity for justice to be examined from different angles. There is no doubt it's a complicated balance between speed and certainty, and one that continues to challenge not only those directly involved, but all of us following this case. Thank you for watching. Support our mission to humanize the justice system by subscribing and join the discussion. We read every comment and value your insights. Join us again as we sit and rise in this unique trial.